everyone. Today, um, we'll be speaking about gender-based violence. So this is my panel today, the youth of Malihambe SDA Church. My name is Shopsile. I'm a youth from Malihambe, and I am interested in the topics about gender-based violence because they hit home. I'm a female living in South Africa, where there are just huge numbers of people who are being killed because of their gender, and that is why gender-based violence has sparked my interest. So I'll start on my right and introduce all the way this side.
So I'm Nandi. I also go to Malihambe, and I think for me, it's not that I am passionate about gender-based violence, but it's I think a thing of I probably will experience it, so I need to be informed, and educated about it, and also help spread awareness to other people as well.
Hello, my name is George. I also go to Malihambe. I think this topic, gender-based violence, I think it's important to us as well as youth, because they say that we are the leaders of tomorrow, something like that. But I know, so it has to start with us. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Musa Mweketi, and I'm also from Malihambe. Well, I actually came to, I'd like to say it's like a discussion to actually discuss about this gender violence thing. It's actually an interesting topic because it happens like in our daily lives every time on news. We always find out that there's a couple of women that have been killed based on their gender and everything. So I find it interesting, and I think that it's necessary that we talk about it and then spread awareness. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nomshe, and I can say that I'm a survivor of gender-based violence, and also I'm reminded of this every time I walk down the road and I come across a man and the hairs at the back of my head stand, and it reminds me that I could be a victim at any time again. And I was really struck by Nandi's introduction, which was like I could be a victim. Next time it could be me. And that's quite scary. And that's one of the reasons why I'm participating in this discussion today, to say that, hey, let's stop this so that Nandi doesn't have to say, I'm a survivor.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I think we should pray first before we continue with our questions.
Thank you, Nandi.
Someone can lead in prayer.
Musa, can you pray for us?
Okay, let's close our eyes as we pray. Heavenly Father, I'd like to thank you, Lord, for a wonderful day you've given us, Lord. I'd like to thank you, Lord, for the gift of life, Lord, and the privilege of prayer, Lord. I'd like to thank you, Lord, for keeping us during the week, Lord, and throughout the week, Lord. I'd like to thank you, Lord, for guiding us and protecting us, Lord, throughout the week as well, Lord. May you please, Lord, continue blessing us, Lord, and Lord, may you continue being there for us when we need you, Lord. I pray all this in your most gracious and humble name. Amen.
Amen. And so gender-based violence is defined as any act of violence that results in the physical, sexual, psychological harm or suffering based on their gender. Last week, there was a march that was for males only that happened, conducted by the Rema Ministries, and that was very inspiring. So today we would like to bounce off ideas and learn from each other. So the stats, just to lay the foundation, so the stats are that one woman is killed every 3 hours. 25% of the women who are killed in South Africa, 25% of those are girls and 17% of those are boys. So, preparing for this discussion, I created this circle. So, the bigger circle is the nation as a whole, South Africa. The middle circle is the church, the Christian religion, and the circle within that circle is the SDA church. So, we'll start from the bigger circle onto the middle circle and onto the smaller circle for this discussion. Um, so my first question to you all, to start off this discussion, is how social media has been used as a tool for the gender-based violence.
Can you repeat the question again,
So the
please?
question was, how has social media been used as a tool for gender-based violence?
Okay. Well, for me, I think the news, most of the youth, I guess since we're talking about youth, most of the youth doesn't watch the news as often, and I think we're all very present on social media, mainly Instagram and Twitter. So I think social media plays a big part because we find out about gender-based violence acts based on, going on Twitter and looking at our feed, also Instagram, what people repost. So I think that if we didn't have social media, we wouldn't be as aware of what's going on, because it's like I open my Instagram and I go into people's stories and I see all this information and I read about it and it just links onto more and more. But if I'm watching the news, the news doesn't really show what's happening, and if they do, it's like I guess one story every couple weeks, whereas there's a new story every day, every couple of hours. So I think it really helps in spreading awareness to the youth.
Thank you for that. Any additions?
I actually agree with Nandi because like I feel like normally on the news they wouldn't like basically like focus on the situation at hand. But then like let's say you wake up in the morning, go on Twitter, you actually see what's trending, and 99 times out of 10 times out of 100 times you actually see that most things are like trending. Like for example, there was some movement called Black Lives Matter. It was trending on Twitter, and for me, if I wasn't on Twitter, I don't think I would have even known about like the movement and everything. So yeah.
Also, to add on that, I think that in spreading awareness about it through social media, there's always like petitions. Like if you go into people's stories, like they'll like have links of petitions. I think it's called like change.org. That's when everyone's petitions on. You can donate and you can sign and you can even like create your own. I know that I've signed so many, and I think that also helps, spread awareness and try make a change as well through social media.
Yeah, and the fact that you can share those petitions that you sign as well. Yeah.
But I also think that social media, they're not youth. What, the elderly? They're not old, but like the people who are not youth,
Middle-aged.
Middle-aged. They're not as present on social media, and then they watch the news, and the news doesn't showcase these things, so they're not aware of this. We as the youth, like mainly Gen Z and millennials, we're aware of this, but other generations aren't, and the news won't help them. So social media really helps us.
Yeah, I do think that there's also, I guess, the negative side of social media towards gender-based violence, because I'm sure that there are people who are for breaking down the whole system of gender-based violence, as well as those who encourage it through the way that they comment on pictures or on videos and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay. So we'll start with the bigger circle. So Cyril Ramaphosa, the President Cyril Ramaphosa, he declared gender-based violence as a national crisis last year in September. And that, I think, was very important because, South Africa has the highest number of sexual violence cases in the world, and that's just heartbreaking. The fact that South Africa just has to be up there for such a horrific thing. And so what I want to talk about right now is the other circle, Christians, religions. As we are part of the part of Christianity, I think that we might be able to have a say in the Christian perspective of fighting this gigantic issue that we have. Um, so in 2001, there the news they did declare that the dominant religion in South Africa is Christianity, and so then that's just quite interesting. The fact that yes, there are 80%. 80% of the population is mostly the Christian religion. Um, I want to ask what you guys think about religion, and do you think that religion might have an effect on fighting gender-based violence?
I think Christianity, as in mostly us, should say SDAs, we do play a part, a role in this fight against GBV in a way that we are taught or we learn that we have to love one another, and in that way we know that I can hate my friend, I can do this to my friend or to my partner or to my kids. So I think yeah, we are taking part in a fight against the GBV.
Yeah, thank you for that. Last week, some bishop did say that they were having a conversation with a news journalist, and the news journalist was saying that the church has to try and fight gender-based violence within the church by calling out those who partake in gender-based violence. And I had a friend who said that they went to church and they saw who was preaching, and they knew the story of that preacher. And so they decided that they were going to leave the church and walk away from the sermon and not listen to the sermon because they knew what that preacher was doing at home. So what do you guys think? Do you think that that's an effective way to fight this issue where we call out these people? Where do we call out these people? Is there should there be a platform where we can safely call out people who are attacking their loved ones based on their gender?
I think is it working? I think where we can start is, I guess, people come out with their testimonies, because I think if people come out with their testimonies and what they've experienced, and they can call out people, I guess, then I think it will also help if, like, I guess, like a list is brought up and we can just see like the pattern on who these people are, what age group, where they live, what church they actually attend, and then with that we can actually dive deeper and find a solution, when people come and they give names.
Okay. Any more additions? Okay.
Let me just add on that. I think we as Christians as well, we have to you find that maybe pastor, he's preaching about love, he's preaching about maybe charity, but then his family, they don't feel love from him. He doesn't have charity in the community or in his family. So I think not only the pastor but even us as youth, we have to practice what we preach.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Oh no, I was just going to say practice what we preach, but I don't think we're given that platform to preach. So, practice what we preach, but we're not really preaching. So, that also plays a big part in it.
Okay. So there are three types of people that are affected by gender-based violence. So there's the survivors, there's the bystanders, and then there's the perpetrators. So I want to find out with you guys whether you think that Christianity masks perpetrators of gender-based violence. Yeah. So the perpetrators are, like what I was saying, the people who are within our community, within the church community, who are violent towards their loved ones. Yeah. Because, the church says it's the end of the world, Jesus is coming, and then they might throw in Matthew 24 on you. So you start thinking, is it worth it to fight this fight? Is it worth it to partake in this fight trying to stop gender-based violence when the world is ending in a way? So I want to find out what your guys' thoughts are on that.
Well, personally, I feel like survivors from like actually gender-based violence and everything, before they actually went out, like maybe on social platforms to like get what's on their chest off. Like maybe a couple of times first they were not taken seriously, like to say so, because most of them, it's not easy for like them to like go out and like confess to someone else, because it's going to be hard for like the people around them to actually believe in what they say, because let's say the person who actually did like all those bad stuff to them is like has like a good reputation and everything. So like when you come up with those bad news, they'll just be like, nah, no, we don't believe you. Why would he do that? He's got such a good reputation. He treats his family so well. So yeah.
He knows the SOP left, right, and center.
Yes.
He wouldn't do such. Okay, all right. Yes, I agree with that. I just want to find out with you as well. So there's the other end of the spectrum with this gender-based violence thing, connected with religion, where we say no one is perfect, and everyone's a sinner, and so then people are like, no, but there's no hierarchy. There's no hierarchy of sins, Now, I think as Christians, we are trying to encourage people to walk in the path that Christ walked, And so the next segment I think I'd like us to discuss, is the remedy. We know that this issue is plaguing our country. So do you think that the church, the youth, has a remedy for gender-based violence?
Well, I know last year, I think in September, my school, I go to a Methodist school, we did 40 days gender-based violence activism. So on the first day, the whole school, we marched around the school with signs in silence, and then we said a prayer, and then our rector spoke. And then throughout the following days, the 40 days, we did little bits of activism here and there. We spread awareness throughout the whole school, and it included like the grade 3s all the way up to the matric, so everyone was really aware of what was happening. And we also did, we also had like, I guess, spoken words, we had poetry, in assembly, in chapel, because chapel we go once a week, and in chapel, it's like church, and then, but there, throughout the 40 days, every week we used to, the heads of spirituality used to come together, and girls would share their testimonies, and we'd read the word, and it was just I think it was very impactful. So I think if the church were to take that on, and I guess also do like our kind of 40 days of activism, and not only within Malihambe, but like other churches in the surrounding areas as well, to just bring about awareness, and like we could go and we could give sermons as youth, I think that would also be impactful. because I think people know that it's a thing, but I don't think people know how big of a thing it is, you know, and I don't think people know like the details and the depth. And I think most people think it's just girls that are the victims, but it's also like young boys. So I think people just need to be aware of that. And I think if the church could also do that, it would also help, you know, spread awareness and maybe give a solution. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I like the idea of where your classmates
Yeah.
took part in saying out their testimonies.
Yeah.
I think we should be able to create a safe space where people can actually be believed. And that's the issue, I think, with gender-based violence, where not a lot of people are coming out and going to the police station to seek help because they think that they wouldn't be believed. And I think also in our church, that would probably be an issue as well, because you come out and you say, oh, I've been violated, you know, and people wouldn't believe you because that person who you've been violated by, they don't necessarily see them as a violator, you know. Yeah.
And I also think another thing is that if people come out, they'll come out on Twitter. Like there was this thing like 2 weeks ago where they came out with their ages, you know, like 13, 15. And then lots of girls and boys also came out and said what age they were when they were victimized. And I think that if people do come out, they come out at school or to their friends. No one comes out in the church. You know, no one feels, I guess, safe enough to come out with their stories in the church because, I don't know, maybe it's because they feel like they won't seek any help in the church or they don't feel comfortable. So I think we also need to create like a safe space for people to come out in the church and not just on social media, on Twitter, at school. You know, they need to do it here because we come here once a week, every Saturday. So we should feel safe enough, don't you agree? You know?
Yeah, I agree. Okay. So my question was, is gender-based violence infused with culture?
I think it is. Many African cultures, or even like, I guess, Asian cultures or like Middle Eastern cultures, I know that young women get married off to older men. And I guess if you're married, it's not it's gender-based violence. And I think that those girls are victim to it, but I don't think it's like they know that they are because it's their culture. It's like you get married off when you're young, and it's just like, oh, you know, my mom did this, like my grandma did this, like this is nothing. But I think that they are, and I think it's in the culture, you know, stuff like that.
And yes.
Yeah, I'd like to also add on to what Nandi said because, like, most cultures, like, mostly like in the rural areas and everything, like, let's say you're still in school and everything, then comes up a man and be like, no, you know what, I want to marry your daughter and everything, talks and actually settles an agreement with your parents without you actually knowing. Then a few years later, graduate, then a man just pops up and says, no, you're my wife and everything without you actually knowing, but yet you're involved. So I think, yeah, mostly it actually starts in like culture and everything.
And I also think what Musa said, it's like there's no consent there. It's just coercion. They just like manipulate you, or they say, no, you're doing this for the family, nah. And then you don't have a say. And then you just, you know, just go in willingly to whatever you're going into. And it's toxic most of the time. And
the lobola has been settled,
and you can't leave, you know.
Let me just add on that as well. I think mostly in rural areas, you find that maybe in those kind of arranged marriages, you find that maybe the man or the guy, he has money, he's rich, you know. So we overlook the issue of is he mentally stable, you know? Is he okay? He's drinking. Like how is it gonna be in the marriage, you know? We overlook that. So I think, yeah, culture is also playing part in this.
Yeah, and also what George is saying, I think also it's a thing of status. So they marry off girls to people who have a high status, and I think people put people who have like a status on a high pedestal and think, oh no, like my daughter will be fine here. This person, there's nothing wrong with them. When you find out that they have mental disorders or they're not okay, they have drinking problems and stuff like that. But I think the family's just, most of the time, the family's just in it for the money and not in for the child's well-being. So they just, they do it.
Mostly like they actually go into, I'd like to say it's a trap, because let's say they've got financial problems at home, then this guy comes up and says, no, I'll just settle everything, like the fees and everything, but as long as you, as immediately when she's done with school or he's done with school, comes to me,
And you find that some of these people are in a very closed area. They don't have much influence from the outside world. So in their own society, it's a norm, right? And they're not exposed to other ideas. So if you're not exposed to other ideas, what you are doing may seem right when it actually isn't, but you know nothing else. So I think knowledge also plays a big thing, is that it limits you. If you don't know much, it limits you. And if you know a lot, and if you exposed to many things, then you can actually say, hey, I actually don't agree with this. I don't feel comfortable. I'm not going to take part, And I think that we're very lucky that we're exposed to many things.
Yeah. That way we can learn what is healthy and what isn't healthy. Okay, so I want us to go on to the next segment, which is men are trash. So I want to ask Nomhle, do you agree when people say men are trash? What is your opinion on that?
When you're doing a protest, you're not trying to rub people's backs and say, not all men or some men. To bring alert and to make people aware, you have to say a very big statement that will catch everybody's attention and be like, I probably need to introspect. So I know that there's been a lot of backlash and a lot of people, or both men and women, who've said, but it's not all men. I don't do that. My brother does not do that. But if we were saying some men are trash, then hey, everybody would be like, I'm not part of the some, So to the extent that all men are trash is a protest statement. It's saying there's something that is wrong and we all need to pay attention to it. And so to that extent, I support it. Men definitely are what? Are trash.
I also think, going on to what Nomhle is saying, if men are trash is said, and if you feel uncomfortable, then obviously you need to check yourself, because you might be part of the problem. You might be part of the men are trash. But if you are a man and you think, hey, I'm okay, and men are trash is said and you feel fine, then it's probably because you are not trash, and then you can move on with your life. But I think it hits deep with men because they know that they are, and they're being called out, and it's just like, wait, what? And they get like all, I don't know, defensive, when there's no need for you to be defensive. It's like the All Lives Matter movement. No, what are you doing with your life,
Yeah, I agree.
The thing is, we need to, just to write on what Nandi was saying, when it comes to Black Lives Matter, nobody said all lives don't matter.
Yeah.
The thing is, right now we need to shine the light on the fact that Black people are under attack.
Yeah.
So the same thing with men are trash. We're not saying all men are trash, but we need to shine a light on the fact that there's a very huge number of men who are instigators of murder and all these sorts of crimes. And so to bring attention to that, we have to be drastic. It's not going to be comfortable. It's not supposed to be comfortable because it's a protest.
Yeah. And I think it also plays into toxic masculinity and how boys are raised with a very toxic mindset, patriarchy, boys up here, girls are second. And it's also that thing of they grow up like that and they never question, oh, maybe this is wrong. And so when men are trash comes about, they're like, but wait, this doesn't exist. We're all equal. No, men are not trash. And it's just like, no, but if you were okay with the way that you were, you wouldn't be affected by this,
I agree. So I was thinking about abusers and perpetrators and how they came about to be like that. What causes people to experience to be the instigators to be the instigators of violence, because people don't just wake up one day and beat their partner half to death. Yeah.
Well, I think that it all starts like in the home and actually school, because like most of these people, if you take like a check and if you go back to how they were raised or how they were, you find that most of them were bullied at home and at school. They were like abused, and now they're older now, they've got anger issues, and instead of like controlling their emotions and everything, they just lash out. So
And I also think with the thing at school is that kids spend most of their time at school. Like you wake up, you go to school, you do extramurals, homework, and then you sleep, and you don't spend enough time with your family. So, like Musa was saying, if they get bullied at school and they come home and their parents don't check up on them, all that can pent up, and then they can lash out. So it's also, I think, the parents' job to help the child. But if they're at home, I think most of it does start at home.
Yeah, I agree. So when I was thinking about gender-based violence, I was thinking about there was this experiment done by this psychologist, Bandura, and his experiment was basically this doll that he placed in a room, and there was this baby who would watch a video of an actor beating up the doll. And so then after that video was played, they would check if the baby would actually do that exact action on that doll that was placed in the room with the child. And so with that, I want us to think about, I guess, the influences that surround us that impact the way we treat others. We do know that men also experience gender-based violence in their own homes as well, and maybe they aren't actually big on talking because they don't want to be looked down upon by their peers or by other people. Yeah. So I want us to talk about the biblical side of things. We know that the Bible is what Christians read for nourishment and for spiritual nourishment and for communication with God. Okay, so there are biblical examples. Do you think that there are biblical ways in which?
Please state the biblical examples.
Okay, so I was reading about people in the Bible who experienced gender-based violence and about how those people solved those issues. So there's Dinah, who was Jacob's daughter, who was a victim of gender-based violence, and the perpetrator was Shechem the prince. I don't know if we are all we know that story.
Just elaborate for people who don't.
Okay. So Jacob had one daughter and a lot of male children. His daughter Dinah was raped by a prince from a nearby kingdom. His name was Shechem. And so then those sons, Jacob's sons, when they found out about what had happened, they weren't okay with it. And so then Shechem came back and said, look, I love Dinah. I'd love to marry her. And so then Dinah was married off. But before that, Jacob said that all the sons in Shechem's kingdom had to be circumcised. And so then all the men were circumcised. And then Dinah was married off and the celebrations were made. And then um, Jacob's sons, they decided that they would attack the kingdom whilst all the men were still in pain and were still recovering from circumcision. And they decided to kill all the men in that kingdom and to rescue Dinah as well and to kill Shechem and Shechem's father. So that was what happened. So the problem was gender-based violence that happened to this family, and the solution by the sons was to murder.
That's not a solution. And that's also bad parenting on Jacob's part, marrying her off.
Okay. Yeah. So the second example I want to mention is Tamar, David's daughter. So Amnon and Tamar were siblings, and so Amnon was attracted to his sister Tamar, and so then he devised a plan to act like he was sick, and then to bring in Tamar to make food for him, and then he raped her, and after that he refused to marry her because in the biblical law, if you raped a woman, you had to marry her. And David did nothing in that story. David did nothing. He was angry though, but he did nothing. So a few years later, Absalom, who was also David's son, decided to kill Amnon, who raped Tamar. So there's another murder to solve gender-based violence on this part. Yes. So I want us to think about ways in the biblical way of solving this as Christians, solving gender-based violence.
Well, I'd like to start off by saying that everything that is in the Bible is for critical reading, right? The Lord put it there so that we could understand how the societies previously worked, especially with the Old Testament and part of the New Testament, especially earlier on in the New Testament. So they are not cast in stone. They are not hard, fast rules that we are supposed to follow. We're supposed to critically read this and was this the best solution for this case? So, for an example, with the issue of slavery, right? Slavery was something that was practiced. It actually had rules to kind of facilitate how it happens. You see, for an example, you're not wrong by beating your slave to near death, but you are wrong for beating your slave, and things like that. But and that is how colonialists kind of rode this whole thing with the Bible, that the Bible actually supports slavery. So hey, black people, in this case, you are slaves and you'll be slaves perpetually, according to the way that things were designed. And then just coming back to the gender issues, there's a system there were systems that were there in societies previously, you see. So it was the man, it was the woman, and then it were the children, or it was the man and the woman together with the children. So they were always subservient to the man in that kind of a society, right? But at this time, we are called to read the Bible and say, was this the just way of doing things? And we need to critically say, and we need to critically analyze it and reach a decision on whether that is the system that God actually ordained. Just because it's in the Bible doesn't mean that it's God ordained, right? God wanted us to learn something from that. Now, you find that people would justify the things such as you have to stay in a marriage because, hey, you are married and marriage is tough, and whether you get beaten or whatever the case might be, you have to stick it out because God is against divorce, right? Nobody actually ever speaks out against the fact that women abuse is wrong in and of itself. So when we are given a platform, right, we can talk about the 2000 unto
300 days.
Yeah, to 2000. It's good to talk about that, but when you're given a platform, and on another occasion, also talk about the issue that, you know what, as women, you need to go to school, right? Previous societies did not allow for women to go to schools, but let's actually talk about the fact that we need to take our children to school. Is lobola still relevant, right, in our current society? We need to critically speak about that as well, because in some communities, it's actually one of the tickets that are given to men that you are, because you own this person. In some people view it as that I feed you, I paid for you, you're supposed to. So hey, if I do this thing to you, I paid for you. So we need to have discussions around this within the church community, because that is one of the platforms that are given to us to have such conversations. Outside of church, many people do not have a platform to have this kind of a discussion.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think I'm glad that we actually can start off with this discussion. Where we talk about gender-based violence, because it's not something that happens to people who are not Christians. 80% of the population are Christians. It's bound to happen to also people who are Christians. The church should have such discussions, and I think also education is one of the ways in which we can empower women. Education about gender-based violence, and education normally through grade 1 to 12, and whatever path that you choose. Yeah.
I just want to add that wherever the economies are not looking, so I'm not saying that gender-based violence doesn't exist in more affluent communities. It does, but it's more visible in communities where the economies do not look very good, in poorer communities, for lack of a better word, right? So the issue of educating women is very important, right, in that kind of a situation, because it empowers the women to have the power of economy on their end. So now, how it plays out is that the men, right? We know the statistics. Men are generally paid more in the workplace, okay? And then as they try to increase the salaries of women, as the women's salaries increase, they found that the salaries of men further increase. So there is some kind of an adjustment that needs to happen to make sure that these things are level. So gender-based violence doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in a society. We have to look at the issues of economics. We have to look at the structure of the family in the home. Who is actually said to be the leader in the house? Who is said to be the one who has the final take on most of the things that happen? By virtue of being born, some people feel that they are entitled to certain things. And so we need to address this, because gender-based violence doesn't happen in a vacuum. I think you guys also raised the issue of bullying, and Musa said that there's bullying in the home, and I think that one needs to be highlighted as well, because parents somehow feel that whatever they do, they can do no wrong in relation to their children, but you can actually bully your child, which then sets them up for behavior that is wrong, right? Which sets them up for certain things. So we need to ask, what exactly, for an example, I mean, one of the reasons why I was quiet is because I have some very controversial ideas. But we need to look at things such as what is discipline? Define what is proper discipline outside of all the bullying. So parents are also capable of gaslighting, abusing their own children under the guise of actually parenting. But what is parenting? Yeah. And one of the platforms where we can have such a discussion is within the church. It provides for such a platform.
And I also think that what Nomshi was saying about how it's the society as a whole, I know that in church we don't see many women who preach. I can count maybe like a handful that I've seen in my lifetime, and I'm 17. So I also think that in church we also need to empower women more, empower women more. I know that I'm not very traditional. I know that when I'm very controversial too. I know that when we like eat and stuff, it's always the woman in the kitchen. Maybe that's how it's supposed to be, but I just don't like it. So I never do it. And I think that it's also the thing that we're all equal, so we must all play an equal part in things that need to be done on a daily basis,
I agree. So as I was reading up the statistics, about how about like the influence that the youth have, we as the youth, we have a lot of influence. The kids, they look up to us as well, as the youth. So what are we, the youth, doing? How are we teaching our kids? How are we going to teach our kids? We have to find a way to examine, such verses as train up a child, and spare the rod and spoil the child, what does that mean for us? How are we going to raise healthy kids who don't abuse other people,
I think I'd like to highlight that men are actually going through a lot of abuse, and
Yeah.
abuse people abuse others. You
Yeah.
know, that's just how it tends to play out. For an example, you'll have a conversation with a young man and you'll ask them, at what age did you first have your sexual experience? And a young man will say, I had my first sexual experience at around 14 years old. So now the issue of consent comes in, and around how does a person view sexuality, right? So women are abusers. We're not taking out women from the equation. Women are also very capable of abusing. In fact, when I was having a conversation with my psychologist, she said that she sits across many young men who sit in front of her and they tell her what their aunts, their mothers, their, people who were supposed to look after them were supposed. So one of the reasons why we are seeing such a violent generation of men is because men have not been provided that outlet where they're able to say, I went through abuse, I need to heal as a person, right? Because how does a 14-year-old boy give consent? One of the things that might cross their mind is, I probably wanted to because maybe I had an erection, and the presence of such doesn't mean that you wanted to. 14-year-old cannot consent to sex, whatever the situation might be. You cannot consent to that. So we need to provide our young men a platform for them to heal, and that is going to take us much further in the race towards ending gender-based violence, by providing men a platform where they can heal, because we are living amongst bruised and hurting men.
I also think on that, it's this whole stigma of men are strong and men don't cry. So I think if you teach your boys that from a young age of, no, men are strong, men don't cry, keep your feelings in, I think that also it builds up. And if they experience things, they're not going to tell anyone, because men are strong, men don't cry. This doesn't happen to men. When it does happen to men, and then it's just like, if it's brought about, it's just brushed under the dust, brushed under the carpet. So they're not given the platform to do it.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. Like, most of the time, like, if a man comes out, they'll just be like, nah, you're just fooling around and everything, because it's
not
mostly
strong.
it's mostly happening to like women. Yeah, it's predominantly women who are being raped like on a daily basis. So if you come out as a guy and be like, no, you know what, I was actually raped by a woman at a certain age, they'll just be like, no, he's bluffing and everything like that. They're not taken seriously. And that's because in our whole generation, like, most men, as Nandi said, are likely told to not show emotion. So yeah, that's how actually most men end up being rapists and everything, because they're not taken seriously, and actually they've got a lot of anger they've been bottling up their entire life.
I also, Nomhle mentioned this earlier on about children. I think also in church, what is said we should actually try to relate more to the kids, because I know that in church, the discussions that I had, the kids don't understand it. So I think if we would have, and not like, I know we have like Children's Day, I think it shouldn't be like a set day. I think that it should be incorporated into every sermon, every sermon. And I know that there's always like 5 minutes where you talk to the kids, but I think it should be longer. And I think throughout the sermon, you should also include the children, engage with them, so that they also understand and that they also are taught, instead of just in the classes or that 5 minutes before you start your sermon,
Yeah, being relatable. I do agree with that. I think also, as we're just about to, close this session, I just think that it's very important for us to tell kids no means no. For the kids, for the girls, no means no. For the guys, no means no. They should know their basic rights. It's very important that, look, people shouldn't do this to me, and it should be okay for them to be able to tell their parents that this is what happened, and they shouldn't be judged. you should just be able to believe the child's story. Yeah, same for men. If a man comes out with their story, believe them. Yes.
And it also shouldn't be this thing of, oh no, what were you wearing? You know, like, what are you doing? You know, why are you asking those questions? You should ask, it's not about what you were wearing, it's about what that person was thinking. You know, even if I was wearing an oversized t-shirt with sweatpants and you couldn't see any skin, what was he thinking? Because he was going to do it regardless of what I was wearing, you know? It's not the victim's fault. And people always try to say, oh no, it's your fault. It's not your fault, you know? People need to also engage and have that conversation of whose fault was it, you know?
Oh, I just wanted to highlight that coming from a society of African people where we are taught, where for a very long time, you know, black people were taught that we are lesser than, you know. So philosophers are coming around and saying probably one of the things that is informing gender-based violence, especially within our communities, is because we do not have love. So there's self-hate, and we need to we need to also attend to that within the churches, right? To say that the black person is created by God, in as much as, you know, Steve Biko actually speaks, he says in his book that he's writing his book not only to say that whites are not superior, but to say that we are actually equals, you know. So the church is such a platform. I mean, especially within Seventh-day Adventism, church is the whole day. Yeah. This is actually a platform for us to be attending to all the social ills that we're experiencing in our societies. And one of them is actually to speak out on the effects of racism on gender-based violence, which is also an important topic.
I think this one is going to maybe all the parents. How media, I don't know. I know it's a broader topic, but then I just wanna how media has affected the issue of gender-based violence. Like you find that maybe what your kids are watching in their rooms on their smartphones, how is it affecting them, you know, like violence programs, you know, movies and all that. So I think as parents, we should also be responsible for our kids of in terms of what they are watching, in terms of what the yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, I'd actually like to support what George said there. Yeah, because majority of the time that they spend like watching stuff or out there with their friends, it's actually like what they'll reap later on in life. So as parents, I would like to say as parents, they should actually build a relationship with their children so that their children may actually confide in them and something happens to bother them.
It should be easy to confide in them as well. Yeah, I agree. Any last comments? All right. Thank you so much. Oh yes, Namsi.
I've got a last comment.
Yes.
Just to go to what George was saying, you know, it's very important because on the media, our families, black people, are shown to be violent families. So the white families are seen, oh, everything is coherent. The family is going to, but in the you know, this is very prominent, especially with the American movies, that then within the black families, there's always the drinking. There's also there's the gangster uncle or something like that. And we need to protest against that. That is depicting that this thing is normal in our societies, and it's not normal. We don't come from a culture of violence. You know, this was taught to us, and this has been an indoctrination that has happened over several generations, and to eradicate it, we need to start protesting today. And it might never go away in the next generation, but certainly within 400 years, you know, somebody will be looking back and saying, I thank that generation because they started standing up against that. And they say it took them 400 years, but we have reached the destination. And I definitely think that it's possible.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you. I think children do take in everything that they see, you know. And so when a child sees someone being murdered, that's not healthy. try probably to talk to them about it. Let them tell you what they think, and let them be open to you. Any small progress is still progress. We are talking about it, and I'm so happy that we started such conversations and started brainstorming ways to stop this perpetuating gender-based violence within our black families and our nation. So I do think that one day, I think it is possible that we may be able to conquer this. Yes. And so, thank you everybody for participating in this discussion about gender based violence. Your inputs have been very much appreciated. And I do think that those who will be watching will take to consideration and to think about and to meditate upon what we have been speaking about today. Yes. Okay. Nandi, can you please pray for us?
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this wonderful day that you've given us today. Lord God, thank you for helping us guide this discussion. And Lord God, thank you for helping us that we have had this discussion. And Lord God, please may you help that it may be a discussion that we can have continuously, something that we can integrate into the daily sermons in our churches. And Lord God, thank you for just bringing us all together. And Lord God, please may you keep us safe in the times that we're in. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen.